Okay, it is 2:31 and we have a quorum.
Great. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order then. Jessica, if you want to get us started with a roll call.
Yeah, absolutely. By last name in alphabetical order. Crick?
Here.
Cronin?
Here.
DeVries?
Here.
Ryan is logging on now, so we'll give him a second. Gentry?
Here.
Harding?
Here.
And Dowling?
Here.
Okay, we have 6. There's a quorum.
Great. So moving on to agenda B, public comment. Is there anyone in person or virtual that is wanting to make public comment?
We do not have anyone in the room with us. No one has raised their hand online indicating they would like to provide public comment at this time.
Okay, so hearing none, I'll go ahead and move on to the approval of the last meeting's minutes, which were for April 1st, 2025. If no one has any comments or questions on those, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Cool, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. So could we do a roll call vote?
Yeah, Crick?
Aye.
Cronin?
Aye.
DeVries?
Aye.
Dowling?
Aye.
Gentry?
Aye.
Harding?
Aye.
Laverne?
Aye.
Okay. Chad just joined us. We're voting on minutes. Chad, would you like to vote?
I believe you're on mute, but I feel like your face said aye.
Okay.
Good enough.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Moving on to our agenda items for the day. And the first looks like is the Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan.
Yeah, thank you. So the MPO has embarked on this process with the city of Lawrence, Eudora and Baldwin City and received a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant to complete a Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan. And that's what's before you today for your consideration. We'll talk a little bit about the process we went through and some of the high level findings in the plan. Next slide. Yep. Oh, yep. Through this process, like all of the planning, we'll talk a little bit about what Vision Zero is. In the engagement, you'll hear a little bit about what we heard. You'll see some of our findings and our commitment to zero and how that plays out for all of the cities that participated in our process.
Just to clarify real fast, are y'all seeing the presentation screen full screen or are you still seeing it? Yeah, okay, incredible. Thank you for the thumbs up.
So Vision Zero is a safe systems approach that acknowledges there's human vulnerability in air, and it works to design a transportation system that minimizes the consequences of mistakes. It varies from a traditional approach that focuses on crashes where the road user is responsible, where safe systems, fatalities and serious injuries, put it where agencies and organizations are responsible as policymakers, planners, and engineers who build the system. So it's more proactive in creating road network and systems that work for all people. So it involves these kind of 5 phases of safe systems. So Safety Action Plan is the document that establishes our vision. It employs data analytics and the development of strategies for an implementation plan for all of our communities and an ability to monitor ongoing progress of crashes and crash history. During this process, we had a public engagement phases, and in that we had an online survey where we did the typical work that the MPO does through open houses and pop-ups to hear from the people in our community. Admittedly, this was a really challenging topic to engage people on. Oftentimes they told us, well, I don't bike or walk, and moved on, even though safety is about everyone in this space. And even the ones that ended up taking our survey, the majority of which use a car and ride in a car alone, and safety was important to them, and distracted driving was of the of a high concern. And they were very interested in some design and engineering solutions to support safety. So you can kind of see this here in terms of how people chose to use their transportation mode choice. And again, there's 75% of people that supported engineering solutions over some other education or enforcement strategies in these spaces. So over the past 5 years, when we look at 2018 to 2022 data, we reveal the patterns in some of this crash severity and distribution and across the different networks. Like, for example, in Lawrence, the high injury network, which spans 32 miles about, it represents 6.5% of the total roadway network in the city, yet it accounts for 64.8% of injury crashes and 66.2% of fatal and disabling crashes. So when we go through some of the next charts, you'll see how that plays out across the network. In Eudora, the high injury network is 1.5 miles or 3% of the roadways, and it accounts for 64.6% of injury crashes and 75% of vulnerable road user crashes, which is bicycle and pedestrian crashes. And in Baldwin City, the high injury network spans 1.1 mile or 2.6% of the roadways and captures 32% of the injury crashes. This network highlights key intersections and kind of school zones. So we'll flow through each of those slides where you can see each of the community high injury networks, which are those key corridors, the mix of our, for Lawrence, arterial, downtown, and kind of key intersections with complex traffic patterns and how that plays out across the community. So the high injury network for all modes is shown on screen. In the plan, there's also a high injury network for vulnerable road users. And on the next slide, we'll see that displayed for Eudora, where you can see some key locations like those as Church Street with head-on collisions and roadway departures, and 10th and Locust Street for frequent pedestrian crashes with lacking crossing infrastructure and higher vehicle speeds. In the Baldwin City network, you see High Street in US 56 and the intersection with side impact crashes and insufficient turning infrastructure and limited sight lines, and Chapel Street School Zone is where pedestrian crashes feel the need to highlight some additional crosswalk enhancements. So you'll see some of those strategies in the plan as things to address these high injury networks, and the vulnerable high injury networks are prioritization tools for prioritizing future investments in networks where we have a high preponderance of crashes. For Lawrence, there's also an approach that looked at rank corridors. That was a systematic approach to identify corridors that are specifically discussed in the plan because the crash frequencies are a lot higher in this urbanized area. And so you'll see correlations with those and those crash patterns and crash types, and then that helps inform effective countermeasures and strategies in some of those places, and or the need to do some additional work in those spaces. One of the tools that we're finalizing and preparing to roll out also is a public visual representation of crash data in these high risk and high injury locations in order to integrate upcoming and completed safety projects, so the public can have a way to understand what's happening in our area and create accessibility and transparency over time, tracking projects as they occur. And we're in the final stages of deploying this and going to be finalizing that in the coming time, and we'll let you know when that gets posted. In the plan, each city has a table that provides a blend of actions and initiatives to eliminate or maintain zero traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2025. And the chart here on the table kind of shows ongoing short-term, medium-term, and long-term kind of as they've been projected across the plan life, although I would note it's very contingent on acquiring additional federal fundings to help make some of these realities and timelines possible in all of these spaces. Types of projects included in these lists are from some very specific projects, like in Lawrence, the Massachusetts Street and 23rd to remove the sweeping westbound right turn lane, leading pedestrian interval recommendations for safe routes to school crossings, recommended pedestrian hybrid beacon locations, additional corridor studies and policy work around non-motorized prioritization, quick build, and an update to the complete streets checklist. For Baldwin City, such projects entail safe routes to school projects, crossing improvements, and policy considerations for quick build or complete streets. And again, these are just a highlight. For Eudora, this I mixed these up. That was for Eudora, sorry. And for Baldwin City, this entails such things as speed reduction and crossing improvements around US 56 and policy considerations for quick build and complete streets. Overall, we felt like this was a successful project that led us to a list of a lot more work that we're going to need to do in terms of incorporating safety and these networks into our decision-making matrices. But I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have about specific things in the plan or anything that I've presented. We are asking for your recommendation of approval of the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan for Lawrence Douglas County.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Are there any questions or comments on this from the body? Cool. Well, if no one has anything, then I will entertain a motion.
I
I'll move
would
to
move
approve
to
the-
recommend approval of the
Go ahead,
Vision Zero Transportation Safety Action Plan.
I'll go ahead and second.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. Could we do a roll call vote?
Yes, Craig,
Aye.
Cronin,
Aye.
DeVries,
Aye.
Dowling.
Aye.
Gentry,
Aye.
Harding,
Aye.
Laverne,
Aye.
and Voight.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to our second agenda item, which is the Transportation Emissions Reductions Program.
Thank you. In partnership with KDOT, we have put out a call for projects for a second time for under the Carbon Reduction Program funding, federal funding from US DOT for transportation emission reductions. The call opened on April 3rd and applications were due on May 21st. The MPO received 2 applications for eligible projects, and those are attached to the agenda. The first of which was for the the Eudora K10 Church Street signalization and the Mass Street multimodal project from 14th to 23rd. Both the project applications and the scoring rubrics were included for you on your agenda. Both projects were scored and found to be eligible under the funding source. We would note that the Eudora application did not have complete funding for the project and was requesting more funding than was eligible under this call for projects. And so after further definition of that, made their feasibility for delivering the project on time score lower. We feel like today there's 2 options we can take in regard to funding these projects based on the scoring, and the Mass Street multimodal scored higher on the score sheet. So out of those 2 options, there's the first one, which would be to give the Mass Street multimodal project, award them the 2026 funding and delay the award of 2027 funding and host a separate call for project at a later. And then also, if there's only a single year of funding, $232,000 is not funding in an eligible project from another source. That is, we have seen it very challenging for our project sponsors to have smaller federally funded projects. Would be to award the 26 and 27 funding to the Mass Street multimodal project. They would be able, with that uncertainty of the 27 funding, their request. For the MPO.
Go for option one. I know our public works director is trying to work with KDOT right now to identify some more of that funding. And so
of federal funding? Is the project already federalized?
not as far as I'm aware, no, this would be the source of federal funding.
And use the money for 27 if that is the consensus among the group of federal funds in the project and would be an efficient use of the money. That perspective.
Go ahead and screen share again, just to show the options in case that's helpful for the conversation. I can bounce between the scoring sheets if you'd like.
It, or is the risk the same that the 2027 funding may not happen in either?
Decision about whether or not it's not dark.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I mean, just from my knowledge of what's going on at the Fed level and what projects they're prioritizing. Yeah, I don't know if there were any other comments or if the group's feeling a certain way. Obviously, I'm summing for Eudora as our rep, but it sounds like Lawrence also has some.
I have a question. Would the city, if we did option 2, would doing the work and then refunding yourself the funds if they get made? I'm not sure how that works exactly.
Yeah. We're going to proceed with the project. I guess my understanding is
They can't. they can't be taken away essentially in 2027. So, from my understanding, as long as they're programmed, they should be good to go, even if it is, being reimbursed at a later date.
I guess the risk is if the group goes with number one and delays the 27 funding, it's just coming up with a project and ensuring that there's the local funding and or state funding to match the balance of the project to fully fund it. And just speaking on the city's behalf, if we didn't have another federal aid project in 27 programs, I don't think that we do, that the $232,000 is not a lot unless to federalize a larger project. I mean, it would have to be a very small project because we would not want to subject a very, very large project to all the federal aid requirements for $232,000.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where, I know this project's a little over $1 million. I'm not sure where our breakpoint is on whether that makes sense as more of a public works director's realm, but yeah, I see that point.
Jessica, this may be a question for you, it might be for Ryan, if I understand his comment correctly. It sounds like if you opt to pull the $27 down now, it doesn't necessarily lock it in, if I'm following that correctly. Is that right?
Correct, that the funding hasn't been programmed at the federal level. And so we are getting out ahead of it with this to not do a call for single year funding based on these estimates in order to have a project lined up to be ready to obligate if it does get programmed. So the longer we wait, particularly we couldn't wait too much longer till we got the announcement, maybe about 27 to wait for 26. So we did it as based on that guidance from KDOT to put them together to do that call. But since the 27 funding hasn't yet been programmed at that level, it may not be. And so we're in this space of that part of the unknown, in which case that was the conversation we had with Lawrence, which is you have local money budgeted, even though this is eligible, so you can spend your money. It just means you won't get reimbursed. So I think they're prepared to take that risk in that space if we would choose to proceed with option 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even with option 1, if you delayed the award and hosted the separate call for projects, there may never be another call for projects if the feds decided not to program that funding.
Right. So it's really a question of the timing of the issuance of the 27 call for funding at some point. So are we going to have our ducks in a row effectively to get to that call if one is ever let out?
Yeah, and then the challenge is depending on how many years of funding you have, like Dave mentioned, that is a smaller amount of federal money that you wouldn't want to federalize a larger project. And we haven't seen many jurisdictions. There hasn't been a lot of competition for this money because it has been lower values of funding. And so oftentimes either projects are bigger. And so unless there's already a federalized project and funding is also eligible for that, we haven't had a lot of competition in this space because our allocation is only at this, $250,000 mark. So we get into that space too, where if the MPO puts out a call for projects and we don't get responses, then we're in a different scenario where we have to figure out if we don't want to lose the money, where can it be spent or attributed to, right? In partnership maybe with other federal funds, and it becomes a lot more challenging. We would have to go look at maybe coordinating with CDBG project, you know what I mean? Or like the city of Lawrence would, or we'd have to find something else that KDOT was maybe doing to coordinate with if no local project sponsors had other projects that were federalized.
Thank you. That helped. I guess since I've got the floor, I'm kind of leaning, in my opinion, towards option 1, and I'm happy to kind of explain my rationale if it helps the group here. it sounds like, 27 is a may or may not situation. So it feels like, we know the 26 and we have that item. So we could go ahead and proceed with that one. There may be a situation where 27 doesn't get funded, or we find out that there's different projects that are coming up in 27. And I'd hate to kind of close the door to other municipalities or other projects that may be out there that are still trying to materialize. And so while I can see option two's appeal, I feel like on balance, option one may be a greater respect and equity for the rest of the county and the MPO in that respect. So that's kind of my leaning and logic at this point.
If the body goes with option one, would Lauren, I know Dave, you're talking about Lawrence is wanting to do a reimbursement style. So would Lawrence still be able to do their same apply with the same project and get reimbursed if we went with option one in 27?
So if you don't mind.
I don't know that answer.
I
mean, you
don't
could-
know the answer to that either. It would depend on timing, I think.
Yeah, it may be tough for us if the project's
Already been obligated, yeah.
obligated
and
or done
started.
to then
Yeah,
to put to it, but I don't know enough about this program. We haven't done any projects through it before, so I was just kind of seeing if there's any other ideas for other projects. I mean, to say if the Eudora project doesn't come to fruition for funding, if there's any, if there's other possible projects in any community or county that would be eligible for the 27 or could use it, then I'd for sure say let's just be comfortable with delaying that. It's just I know it's a lot of work to go through this process, the application process for MPO staff. It's a lot of work to manage a federal aid project, and so for efficiencies, if there wasn't any other ideas or pathways to fully fund another project, it just seems like from a practical standpoint, number two makes the most sense to me. But being that I'm with the city of Lawrence and it's my project, I want to respect everyone else's opinions, and we're going to move forward with the project regardless. Have the funding to do so. So it's more of just making sure we can use the money. But I'm fine with one as well. That's what the others feel is the best way to move forward.
Do we
so
have,
before you get to a decision, can we please, point of information, just open it for public comment if there's an opportunity that we need to give to anybody who else may be on the call?
Yes, thank you, Jessica. Anyone either in person, doesn't sound like, but virtually in attendance that wants to give public comment on this item?
No one has raised their hand to indicate they would. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Any from the group, any other comments about this before? Sounds like we might just end up having to go to a vote and see how it shakes out. I'm not sure if there's groups leaning a certain way or what.
I have one other question about the pipeline question I think is good, and also being respectful of staff time and applications as well. I thought those were good points. If for a project to start in 27, folks would probably need to have at least some idea of it now, and I agree with the point that to federalize a project with $200,000 is generally tough if you can do it a different way. I'm a little bit leaning towards option two, just to be, to have it done and people can get to work on it. But if we knew of other projects in the pipeline, I would feel differently as well.
So besides the applications we received, we only heard from one other party in the process, and they were just brainstorming high-level projects that could be eligible for this funding without any concrete plans at this point. So everyone else that we've talked to about even exploring projects or other things has either seen the dollar value and chosen not to federalize a project, or doesn't have what would be perceived as an eligible project.
and to David's point on that one, just kind of looking through everything, I'm not seeing much that would possibly fit that rubric and criteria for this real quickly here, unless I'm skipping over one or I'm not not remembering one in whole. There's not a great amount of projects that could quite meet this mark, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, that has been the challenge.
Are the electric buses eligible? Because I know there's
EV vehicles were removed from this, or charging was removed from this most recent round of eligibility for project funding
okay.
based on KDOT's guidance. So I don't believe vehicles in that space for transit would be eligible under this.
And it doesn't cover enough of the cost. We would do the low-no grant.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, there's not. I don't know if there's any other city projects that are probably eligible then that have plans for federal funds in 27. So we wouldn't apply, I guess I would say, unless we came up with something in the meantime, and it would then be, unless there's some other project that came up where if Eudora got the funding, then that would be they could use the funds. So
Ryan, are you aware through the HSIP, like Highway Safety Improvement Program, or any other state funding sources where the timeline for award would be appropriate for this, to do another call in the next year and line up with eligibility for that funding?
Oh, I mean, yeah, not at the top of my head, certainly, but this is kind of Allison's baby. So I can certainly reach out to her.
Okay.
And I'm sure she'd
Yeah.
be more than happy to answer questions on it.
Yeah, the conversation that we had with Allison, who at KDOT manages this transportation emission reduction program, was that her understanding was that like the other funding, which may be most eligible for the Eudora project, the HSIP was already programmed out 2 to 3 years. So it gets us into another timing situation where I don't know what other funds, KDOT may or may not have available that would be federalized that for a federal project of this nature. That's, I guess, what I was just trying to ask. We'd have to follow up, I guess. There's just uncertainty there
Could
also.
certainly do some digging.
Yeah.
could we take the option of awarding the 26 funds now and then the 27 later this year?
We're gonna run into a timeline with TIP amendments, so that's not ideal for MPO staff if you do that, because that requires us to have 2 separate timelines for TIP amendments, or wait until the very last, move around all of our TIP schedule. This is based on our TIP schedule to get it programmed by the time KDOT wants it to be programmed.
The next tip, open projects is later this month. And that's the last for this fiscal year. After that, I believe it's around the new year.
Well, it sounds like we've had some pretty good discussion on this. I don't know if someone wants to make a motion and then we can kind of see how the vote shakes out.
I'll
Probably
make a
Eudora.
motion.
Good, there you go. They were looking for somebody that wasn't the 2 project sponsor agencies.
I'll make a motion to go with option 2.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Jessica, can I go ahead and abstain from this?
Yes, you can choose to once we get to a vote.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was an option at this point.
Yes, absolutely. We're still looking for a second, though.
Don't be shy.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jessica, can we do a roll call vote?
Yes, Crick,
Aye.
Cronin,
Aye.
DeVries,
Aye.
Dowling abstains, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Gentry,
Nay.
Harding,
Abstain.
okay. Laverne,
Aye.
Sanford, not here, Voight.
I'll abstain.
Motion carries 4-1 with 3 abstentions.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. That is our last agenda item for the day. So moving on to E, which is quick updates. And it looks like we've got the Lawrence Bikes Plan update.
We would like to share the link with you to the Lawrence Bikes Plan update. As we're in process of this plan update, we have posted our community engagement summary for the Lawrence Bikes Plan from the results of the first survey on the site. So if you want to go take a look at that, please feel free to do that. We will proceed to second meeting with our steering committee coming up in the coming weeks, but we wanted to keep you apprised of the work that we're doing for the Lawrence Bike Plan.
Great.
Happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions or comments from the group? Cool. Hearing none, it looks like we can move on to our last item for the day, which is other business, which is receiving the U.S. Department of Transportation correspondence.
We have posted for your receipt correspondence we have received from U.S. Secretary of Transportation Duffy on the website. So we will continue to consult with legal and our state and federal partners to understand how this impacts our compliance with federal law. We wanted to share it with you so you're aware that we received it.
Thank you, Jessica. So looks like that will be our last item for the day. So our next meeting is set currently for July 1st, 2025.
See you in July.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.